the best panelists because they love to talk. That's why they're in the field. They love to socialize. So I've tried to create, we're going to have a conversation between Jennifer Mangold, who's the senior manager of global social media at HomeAway.com, and Sarah Neal Simpson, who's the global social lead at Uber, to discuss and to ask each other questions about how they're developing their social strategies, how they're implementing it internally and externally. Please welcome Jennifer and Sarah. And why don't we start, I'm going to start asking you guys to first introduce yourselves and where social sits within your organizations and what the just general state of the social practice is for each of your brands. And you're similar brands in the sense that you're very direct to consumer. You're both sort of sharing brands in a sense, part of that new sharing economy. So you have that in common, but in very different segments. So please just talk a little bit about where social sits within each of your brands.
So that feels like a loaded question to start, so maybe we can just start with names and background and then go into that. I'm Sarah Neal. I, like Steve said, work at Uber. My background is in building social brands for luxury companies. So I worked on building Tiffany's social media. I've worked on Nike, L'Oreal, various brands within Estee Lauder. So I'm coming to Uber with a very much brand-first mentality and very much a brand-driven philosophy.
And I'm Jen Mangold. I've been at HomeAway for almost 11 years. Previous to that, my background, like Melanie, was in SEO, so know her from some of our old conferences back in the day. But yeah, I've been leading social at HomeAway for 8 years full-time, and started the program back in 2008 and have built it globally since then, and it's definitely a challenge, and I can go into Steve's question about kind of where it sits now. It's sat all over the place for several years, and we were in PR for a long time. We moved over to marketing. We actually just did a reorg and have consolidated all of the marketing channels under growth marketing, which I think will be a great way to set us up for success long term, because it's going to make everyone just, I think it'll be easier for collaboration, easier for strategy, easier to split budgets when we see something happening or working well on one channel, easier to move things around and contribute on the other channels and support each other. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, we're also in marketing. But I think what I've learned over the years is social touches every single department within a company. So no matter where you sit, the relationships with other teams, whether it is PR or creative or strategy, are so crucial to being able to push forward the vision and the belief, because it is a company channel and it is so public as the face of a company. I also think that social, when we think of it, and I think teams are so organized as thinking of it as own channels, whatever the feed looks like, but social is so much more complex than that, and in so many ways is a microcosm of whatever is happening for the business. So you're dealing with customer service questions, you're dealing with influencers tagging you, or celebrities talking about you, or the press that's coming out over the New York Times social channels, or whatever that may be. And I think that that's where it becomes a much bigger undertaking. And then there's all the paid elements as well that go into it. So I think it is, in its essence, such a distributed channel in general. So I think we often do a disservice by just saying, you know, the social team makes an Instagram post or is in charge of posting a tweet. It's if you're doing social effectively, it's much, much bigger than that.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, it's definitely cross-channel. We work with every department in the company, from engineering and dev and technology to customer service to you know, the sales team on occasion, depending on what initiatives are going on, events marketing. It really does touch every single thing within a year. And I would say customer service, definitely a huge issue for us. I'm sure you guys as well. We're working on a larger strategy of how to kind of move that out from being solely under the social team as far as being responsible for that piece of it, because it can take a lot of the effort that we would love to be spending on social marketing and outreach and proactive engagement and really trying to connect with those consumers. And we're instead dealing with things that, you know, ideally are customers not locked out of houses and things like that when you're trying to go on vacation, but it occasionally happens. So, you know, it's definitely a challenge on how to split time and how to split priorities. We also manage paid on our team, like Sarah was saying. So the retargeting and prospecting sits in a different part of our organization, but we're doing a lot of paid on content promotion and helping events and marketing and then fan acquisition somewhat.
How do you determine where to spend time and energy from your team? Because I think, and we've talked about this, getting into work and running a social team is very much like the first 5 hours of the day are just fires that you're putting out because of things like a customer service complaint went viral, or, you know, there's news breaking that we could jump onto and create a story around, or an influencer didn't tag us but was contracted to or was supposed to. So how do you figure out how to resource the team's time to prevent just being stuck in the weeds?
Yeah, it's a great question. And a little bit of a different answer than I would have given 6 months or a year ago, because we're moving as a marketing organization to Agile. And it's definitely been a bit of a learning process for all of us on the social side on how do we really try to act in that agile way when a lot of things do change on a day-to-day basis, but then there's a lot that's just continuous. Like, we know we have to do customer support every day, regardless of whether we would like to do something else from a planning perspective or not. So we are trying to, you know, adopt as much of the agile principles as possible, have the daily stand-ups in the morning, figure out if there's anything big happening that we can jump on trend-wise. We work with our creative team on a daily basis, do sprint planning at the beginning of the week to make sure that we can have a good creative foundation for the week and not have to necessarily focus on that planning every single day, which we were kind of doing it on the fly even a year ago. So that has definitely helped in terms of just freeing up some time to be able to do other things that we would like to do, like engage those influencers or be more proactive on the outreach. How about you guys? What are y'all doing?
I think we're working on building a team that accounts for all the different facets. And I think, you know, when I came to Uber, the team was very small and a very talented group of women who've been managing the social team for a long time. And I think that it's just gotten bigger and bigger and more visibility has been placed on it. So we just need to account for, you know, who's the person that's dedicated to special projects that always come up, or who's the person that's the liaison between our customer service team, who's managing influencers, both our influencer program and influencers that are talking about us that we're not paying attention to as much as we should. So I think it's really, and someone mentioned this yesterday, it's as the needs grow, it's developing the org to support that versus setting out an org chart at the beginning of the year and meticulously checking those boxes.
For sure. Yeah, it sounds like we're kind of set up the same way in terms of everybody's kind of got their specialization, but if a need arises and something blows up at the beginning of the day, then it's all hands on deck and everybody jumps on it for sure.
I think the challenging thing about that as a manager is figuring out how to keep a team inspired and also talking to each other, because if it stays too specialized, you're not getting those learnings. So that's something that we're working on.
Definitely.
Working on as well.
Are there any pressures on your teams on top of all of these things you just described for customer acquisition as well?
Yeah, we are looking at that. I think there's definitely different opinions within the organization on whether what we're calling owned social is an acquisition channel. And we obviously have B2B and B2C sides of our business from a traveler perspective and then from a vacation rental owner perspective or property manager. So I think it's definitely been a traveler-focused channel previously. We're looking at some options to explore on the content side. Less hard sell, that doesn't work. But I think like with Uber and some of our other competitors, like, there are definitely models that we can look at on how can we inspire people to potentially, want to rent their home if they either have a second home or there's a big event and somebody wants to try it out for the first time for a few days. I think we could do a good job on potentially developing some of that inspiration content that could potentially drive somebody into that acquisition funnel. And like they were saying previously, like, this is not a channel where we're expecting top of funnel conversions. That's not what we do. But we have a great team that if we can get a top of funnel conversion, as in a visit to the site, they can then go retarget those people and actually get them into that conversion funnel. So that's, from my perspective, where we could potentially contribute. We're just now kind of dipping our toe in that water on how would we develop that content and what would that look like and how often would we post it, things like that.
I think that my answer is kind of a two-part answer. So in terms of social as an acquisition channel for Uber, I think that previously that has very much been the goal, and growth has been a top priority. And I think that's probably true for most companies. Like, fan growth is the indicator of success. Like, you have 5 million, that's better than 800,000 or whatever. But I think that, what you start realizing is growth at all cost is not the best thing for social always, especially if you're truly trying to build a community that really supports you. And so that's something that we're doing right now, is we're taking another look at who is our audience, and, is it the right audience? Is it the right audience for the content that we're developing? And is it the right audience for, what we see social as in the future? Because I think right now, pushing out messages to people who are not receptive to that is just, it is a waste of resources. So we're trying to kind of figure out how to reconcile. And it's something that I did long ago for L'Oreal, where we did an audit of all of their social channels, and it was a lot of PETA activists and people seeking discounts and customer service issues, and they wanted to transition it into more of an inspiration channel. So that was something that we architected in terms of how we built the content, which influencers we engaged, how it was pressed, that kind of thing, which was really successful. And then the second part of my answer, I guess, is I think it's so crucial to look at the business model and to talk to other leaders and the executives to understand how they see social fitting into a company. Because if you're thinking of top of funnel conversion, home away, like planning a vacation, is a much longer lead time than booking a car or jumping on an electric bike. Like, what is the role of social media content in that environment? And so I think it's also being really, really ruthlessly harsh. Like, are we a customer service channel? Is that where most of our time should be spent or resources should be dedicated? Or is it an inspiration channel, which I think is probably different based on the business needs?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Sarah. Like, I've been working closely for about the last 6 or 8 months with the president of our company just to figure out what is his vision for long-term social. I mean, we've definitely had a perspective for a long time on what we should be doing. And I think he's rightly so pushing us on, let's quickly test and learn, let's do some paid testing so it's not necessarily hitting the channels. We're gonna do some audience targeting and try to figure out, like, how do we future-proof, honestly, because we have a very specific target right now, but we know that millennial generation is coming up. They're going to be our moms in 5-10 years. They're gonna be the ones traveling, planning vacations. So we do have to kind of shift our mindset a little bit on not ignoring our current customers by any means, because they're going to be our core base for a long time, but also trying to shift our content strategies, acquisition strategies, everything, just to make sure that we aren't alienating people who will be coming up in the next few years too. Cool. And you were talking about influencers a little while ago. How are you guys building that program? Are y'all doing it in-house? Are you working with the agency?
So we've had an influencer program for a while, and it's currently managed through an agency, and we focus on micro-influencers. And, we're really adamant about having long-term relationships with influencers, both because we want them to truly love the brand and the company, and we want to be good partners and grow with them. So that's something that we've been working on for a while. I think now we're getting to a place where we need to think, is it the time to think about celebrity influencers? Is it the time to think about turning our community or our fan base into advocates, or people just that are very authentic to their group of friends into kind of super micro influencers, I guess. But I think it's a hard thing to figure out, and I think working with influencers can be challenging. It can be amazing. So we really rely on our agency to handle a lot of the back and forth and to help us find the best new talent and to help contract them.
Yeah, and we've been doing that a little bit of each. We've definitely tried to build our in-house program from scratch, and I've got a great team that's super passionate about influencers, and they've done a really good job cultivating those relationships. I think that is very important, and we've done some of the celebrity work, we've done some of the kind of mid-level, low-level, and I think from our perspective, the big celebrities, those are nice for those splashy campaigns. It's not necessarily something that's going to drive that long-term either engagement or conversion with the brand, because it's more like, oh, I love your shirt, so-and-so celebrity, not, oh, that's an amazing house, how do I go rent that? So we've seen that deeper conversation definitely happening at the micro-influencer level. So I think that's probably where we'll try to focus. It's obviously more cost efficient than trying to work with celebs all the time. Easier, not having to deal with their talent agents and all of that fun stuff. But we are seeing some conversion from those micro influencers because they do have that more authentic conversation. And I think that's easier in terms of us being able to work with them, develop that program, and even the compensation piece. We have different ways that we can compensate them, and one thing that we tried earlier this year was developing a small affiliate test and trying to turn some of our micro-influencers into affiliates to see if that compensation model would actually resonate with them. I think we found some good and bad on that. We definitely got a lot of learnings out of it, and something we'll probably explore a little more. It definitely takes some education around that piece in terms of what does that mean. It's not something that the influencers have been familiar with because they're not affiliates. But that's something that we're probably going to explore in the future just to see, because that is an incentive for them to go and talk about the brand more and become better advocates for us.
Yeah, and I think you use the different tiers of influencers to achieve different goals. If you want to work with a celebrity, then that's a reach and awareness goal. But the engagement really does come at the micro level. And I think that how willing people are to experiment with things like affiliate links or referral codes versus straight compensation, that also depends on the level or kind of, what deals they're used to, and that changes all the time.
How are you guys developing content on a day-to-day basis? Like, is that coming from your team, or does another team help plan that?
So we have a creative team, an in-house creative team that helps us plan that. And what we've tried to do is figure out what are series that continually go back to our brand mission, continually show our brand point of view, and try to develop that in batches. And then we work on campaigns that are bigger hooks or bigger opportunities to pull in new people, because I think, again, with social, you're trying to acquire, but you're also trying to satisfy the people that are currently following you and give them a reason to continue doing so or continue engaging. So we're kind of operating on two fronts there.
Yeah, I think we are as well. I mean, there's definitely a split between what do we do as far as a retention play versus like how do we speak to those potential new fans or new site visitors, and does that content look really different? Can it look kind of similar? We've found that a lot of our content in the past has worked for both audiences. I don't know that that will continue to work in the future, so that's why we're doing so much testing. From a user-generated content perspective, are you guys using a lot of that or trying to build it?
Yeah, so we currently have a series going on called Backseat View. If you have a beautiful view outside of your Uber, you can tag it. But I think that, you know, when getting user-generated content, and I think this is part of the education that always comes at companies around social, it feels very instant to all of us because we all have an Instagram account or a Twitter, and it seems so easy to make decisions, but that comes with knowing exactly who you as a person are and what you're willing to say. It gets way more challenging as a company, but all that being said is it just takes a while to build things on social. Like, it gets worse before it gets better, and in the case of user-generated content, we're seeing attraction and growth on this series, but it has taken a while. So I'm really thankful for the teams we work with of granting kind of that time and understanding and learning as we go and optimizing as we go, versus, you know, saying, okay, we're not seeing any user-generated content after a week, and so we're going to kill it. And I think that's, you know, it's been a challenge in the past, but luckily it's not at Uber.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions of Sarah and Jennifer before they go on? Yeah.
Paul Friedland, this is my 8th question, so I don't feel the need to say who I am anymore. I think with both of you, you guys have glaring, obvious competitors, which we won't name. But can you talk a little bit in terms of how you guys are using social to, let's say, create a point of difference and some separation from your obvious competitors in the space?
Yeah, I can take that. I mean, everybody knows who our competitor is. I think there are naturally some differences that may not be as obvious from a consumer perspective, but our focus is on families, groups, large travel that you're going for reunions or that getaway where it's multiple families, less so business travel, quick getaway for the weekend with my boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse. We're trying to kind of dabble in some of those different content areas and the different segments just to see what will resonate. Again, going back to we've got to build for the future as well. So I think the points of differentiation are necessarily with the product and who we've always had as our customer base. And if you look at the content, I think, you know, for our competitor, it's definitely a lot of storytelling, feeling inclusive, and that plays to their core audience. That doesn't necessarily resonate with my audience, and that's why you see the content looking very different. And hence, we have to do a lot of testing to figure out how we kind of start picking and choosing where we want to go with some of the different content strategies without alienating that huge base that we have now that may not necessarily enjoy hearing about somebody else's beach getaway, because why do I want to talk about somebody else's vacation? But, you know, it is an important piece in just bringing that human element. So that's something we'll be working on for the next few months.
And I think in terms of Uber, we have different, the thing we didn't touch on is social is also global. Yeah. So it's not gated by geographic borders. And competitive advantage and competitors are different for us all over the world. Same with you guys, I'm sure. And so what we do is we really, as Jennifer said, lean into the product differentiation. Like, what are our differentiators as an overall brand, and lean into those. I don't think that we're particularly concerned about, you know, what is the latest campaign from any competitor. I think that that's actually a bit of a blessing when you can take a more holistic, a higher level view versus just constantly being worried about what a competitor is doing or how they're messaging. That's when you get into a bit of a death spiral where you're not thinking about the bigger trees and the forest, I guess, for the trees, and you don't really know what you stand for. And
I think for us, too, I mean, it's focusing on like, what is that core message versus jumping big splashy campaign to big splashy campaign. We definitely had some of those in the past, so that's not to say that we won't ever do them again, but I think having that core set of content pillars and building that message and that brand versus relying on those big things that may or may not resonate with the next group of people for the next big splashy campaign.
I want to take my MC's prerogative here and ask 2 final questions before we go to roundtable. One is going to make me sound like the cranky 60-year-old that I am, and is, who the hell are the social influencers in the categories of shared home and shared rides? Who is out there blogging about this stuff? Who have generated reputations around this? I just got to know this.
I mean, in our world, it's definitely a lot of the mommy bloggers. Those are our core group of people. They're the ones that are traveling with their families all the time. We get lots of, I mean, just random types of influencers coming to us all day, every day, of course. Like, you know, fashion person's going to New York Fashion Week and they want to stay in a house. We're like, it really doesn't mean anything to our moms, but if it's a mom going to Fashion Week and she's taking the whole family, that's a completely different scenario for us. So I think that's where we've concentrated. Definitely have looked into other spaces depending on either we're focusing on new segments and we want to try to find 2 or 3 people we can work with there. But for us, it's definitely less quantity and we go with quality. We want to make sure that the people we're working with are somebody that we want speaking about the brand and want to, you know, potentially develop a longer term relationship with them. So I think that will continue to be that core group of mom bloggers that are out there talking to their friends every day and they love our brand, which is great.
And I'll say there are influencers in the shared rides space, but that's not who we look for as influencers, because you know how we choose the people that we work with is based on who their audiences are or who they're speaking to, and then we find a way in with them through the lens of their actual life. And I think that's, you don't focus on who is talking about necessarily you or the vertical or whatever. You figure out how to incorporate your product, because I think both of us are like tech in real life platforms, right?
Yes.
So you're just demonstrating the value that other more influential people see in the product.
And I finally just want to do one sort of media channel check with the 2 of you of how you regard evolution and where you see changes going on across the major social platforms. Are there things that are actively changing, that have changed your strategies? Are you seeing things emerging that worry you, that encourage you in Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, any other channels that you're seeing emerging that are important to you?
I think, you know, social is not a set it and forget it platform. It changes every day. You monitor the data and you see, I mean, you can see the algorithm shifting. Like when Instagram started rolling out their disclosures in their geotags, you saw engagement drop across the board 30%. And I think that you often see it. You see the nuances before it's announced or released. And so I think it just means a lot of vigilance in paying attention, holding the platforms accountable, and also knowing what you're going after. In terms of what worries me, I mean, it's really challenging to live in a data-driven world when the data portals are constantly being turned off or turned on, and you don't know what you can get from one day to the next. Like, your tools don't work half the time because Facebook has cut off API access to whatever feature, and you're sunk into a big overhead contract without any real recourse. And so I think just the massiveness of the platforms it's always a concern. And I think that that's something that we've talked about, and I tell my Facebook reps themselves.
Absolutely. I would say on the what worries me, that's 100%, like we just never know from day to day what we're going to have access to. I think some of the newer things, we obviously try not to jump on bandwagon of the new shiny thing immediately, and that's, you know, something we have to temper with different people at different times of, hey, this new network just launched, let's be one of the first 10 brand, why? You know, so I think that's just always a challenge that social marketers face. But I think for us as an opportunity and a challenge is making sure that we are quick to test and quick to learn and quick to fail. So even on things like Instagram TV, we don't have a massive live TV or huge video program right now. Is that something that we need to play in? We've done a couple of tests. We're talking to some of our influencers. We have a TV show, so we're working with the host of that TV show to figure out if there's something that's there for that. So I think just being strategic and critical thinking about what do we want to try and how important is that to the brand, and can you reach the audience that you want to reach versus just throwing it out there just because.
Sarah and Jennifer, thanks for playing along and being such good co-interviewers of each other. Thank you guys very much. And Sarah's going to lead the roundtable on social, and we are going to break up into our roundtables now. We have one on content strategy that Melanie